Happy Thursday. All right, everybody, let's get in here and let's get ready for another Title University Thursday where we discuss a hot topic where we learn more to earn more. I am excited about today's topic. I'm excited about it because it's long overdue. It's something that I get questions about. Unfortunately, after the fact, after issues have already arisen, and so I knew it would be necessary to. Hey, I figured it was about time to have this conversation and really answer a lot of questions around seller representation. I realize that many do not realize that the seller and even the buyer, they can have their own representation at closing outside of the closing agent. And so we need to have this discussion. How do we engage attorney representation? Why is it useful? Why is it a topic that you should really know about? So without further ado, let's get right into it. All right. So attorney representation at closing. Who is your seller's attorney? Who is your seller's attorney? All right. For those who I have not had an opportunity to meet before, my name is Ray Cole Jackson. I'm the founder of Title Experts University and Title Experts, the full service title insurance and closing firm that services all of Florida. It is a joy and a privilege to come and have this conversation with you all every week, bringing you a new topic. Again, like I mentioned before, that will helpfully allow you to learn more and earn more. The objective of today's conversation, I hope by the time we leave here after this lunch break, is that you understand how you will elevate your seller's closing experience and add legal counsel to your team through attorney seller representation. How does this create a better closing experience for your seller? And how does this add to your team when you engage seller representation, attorney seller representation? So here's why this is important. Imagine this. Have you ever had issues with building authority and the trust of the seller? Have you ever felt like they really clearly are not listening to me? Or they don't understand that I'm the obvious choice to represent them in this transaction? Have you ever had contract drafting errors? After the contract is drafted and it's with the closing agent, well, says, well, this is what the contract says. And you're like, oh my gosh. Are you unaware of terms that can protect the seller? Have you ever come across a contract or you spoke to a colleague and they were like, well, how about, did you ever see this in a contract? And you're like, oh, I didn't realize I could do that. I didn't realize that we could, that was a thing, right? How about, have you ever had issues with driving timelines and enforcing terms of the contract? You're battling back and forth with the closing agent to have them push the timeline. Why is it? Where is the estoppel? Where is the right? Where's the there? We need to close by the third. Or is title clear? Are the parties scheduled for signing? Right? Or no, they should have done this by this date. How about issues come up and you have to, go outside of leave the closing agent conversation and then go and find an attorney to say, well, this is the issue that I have. How do I resolve this? How many times has that happened? Probably a lot of times. And if you haven't seen it yet, do a couple deals and you will see it, right? Today, you'll learn how to engage attorney seller representation to avoid that. It's easily avoid all of those issues and then some. All right. So, first of all, what is attorney seller representation? I know most don't understand that attorney seller representation is when an attorney is engaged to unambiguously represent the seller and their interest in the transaction. The seller, and that's all. They don't represent the buyer, they don't represent the lender. They are wholly concerned with ensuring that the seller's interest in that transaction is protected. They only represent the seller. You're most commonly used to dealing with the closing agent that's the middleman for all parties involved. When you engage attorney seller representation, that attorney is going to represent your seller and you in the closing, right? Attorney seller representation is most commonly engaged when the closing agent is selected by the buyer. When the closing agent is selected by the buyer, what does that mean? So, you know that most commonly in South Florida, the buyer will select the closing agent. So we have here on the screen a graphic that shows our state of Florida. And the counties that are in what I call title experts gold are counties where the buyer generally selects the closing agent. The county, I finally made it. The counties that are in white are counties where the seller generally selects the closing agent. Now, when the buyer selects a closing agent, those are the counties where you're most commonly going to see outside seller attorney representation. You're going to have a closing agent, and you're also going to have the attorney that specifically represents the seller. What does that mean? That means that the closing agent will receive funds, they will disperse funds, they will be the ones responsible for issuing the policy. However, the seller has their own attorney who will communicate with the seller directly. The seller will need not have any communication with the closing agent because the seller's attorney and that firm will communicate with the seller on behalf, will communicate with the closing agent on behalf of the seller. They become the go-between. They become the representation for the seller communicating with the closing agent. So this is how it usually happens. Now, that's most commonly, but it can be engaged on any transaction. So, for example, in those counties where the seller will select the closing agent, you still want to engage attorney representation for a couple of the points that we're going to discuss in a few. Let's get to the points. So, first, building authority and trust of the seller. Guys, attorney engagement starts at the listing appointment. Here's what that looks like. You go to the listing appointment and you say, along with myself, I have on my team a real estate attorney that will represent you at closing, review the contract prior to execution, work with you and myself and the closing agent to ensure that whatever offer we accept and we go under contract, whatever buyer, they're going to ensure that the terms of the contract are followed. And if they are not, they will be there ready and engaged to enforce those terms. Who are you going to hire? Are you going to hire, if you were a seller, would you hire the agent that's backed by an attorney and can bring that relationship to your seller, or an agent who is not? I would think I'm going with the agent that has an attorney, that's backed by an attorney to support them in that transaction, right? So attorney representation allows you to set yourself apart. Make a note of that. Put a note to the side to ensure that you include that in your next listing presentation. You already have a benefit of seller attorney representation immediately, right? Second, contract drafting errors. Do you have someone who reviews your best offer before it is accepted? Because I commonly see errors that can be avoided. So what does this look like? You have a listing, you get 12 offers. You go over the offers with your seller. Your seller finally says, this is the one I would like to accept. You take that offer, you reviewed it, you've said, okay, this makes sense to me. You send that to the attorney to say, this is the offer that we intend to accept. Can you take a look at this and make sure that we haven't missed anything? One of the most common errors that pains me, guys, in contract drafting is the loan approval deadline. Believe it or not, as many times as we have this conversation, about making sure that you review your timelines and you review your terms, we still get contracts for closing where the loan approval deadline is after the closing date or right up on the closing date, allowing the buyer to cancel the contract for lack of loan approval right up to the day of closing, right after the day of closing. That could have been avoided. That could have been avoided. And so if you have seller attorney representation, you get an offer, you say, okay, this is the one, all the terms make sense. Let's get this over to your attorney to have them review it to make sure that they also agree with the terms. We sign it, we're on a contract, we're on our way to the closing table. The second benefit of seller attorney representation. Thirdly, know that the purchase contract is standard and is essentially neutral. It is not written to benefit the seller more than the buyer on balance, right? There are terms that benefit the seller more, there are terms that benefit the buyer more, but on balance, it's neutral, right? It's not like, for example, our landlord tenant laws that on balance, they benefit the landlord more. Your purchase and sale contract is neutral. However, there are terms that can protect the seller specifically. How about you add terms about release of the escrow deposit immediately upon a certain term or date? That's possible. How about a term that you know, I know I commonly we add arbitration because the contract provides for litigation. But if you add that arbitration addendum, which saves you time and money in the event of a dispute, that more favors who? The seller. The seller does not want to litigate in the event of a dispute. Most transactions are not going to go there, but an attorney thinks better to have and not need than to need and not have. And there's a whole host of other terms that can be added to the contract to protect the seller's interest. Each party has different interests. It does not necessarily burden the buyer, but it protects the seller. It protects what's most important to the seller. Seller attorney representation provides support with drafting addendums. How many of you have ever sent a quick email? I know I get them all the time. Does this language make sense? Does this language make sense? I'm trying to draft an addendum. Does this language make sense? That's great. That's what you should do. But if you engage attorney seller representation, you don't ever, that can be standard protocol every time you have a seller. That is what you do for your sellers. You have a standard protocol. At your listing appointment, your sellers are made aware that you have that you are attorney backed, right? When you receive offers, your buyers are even aware that you are attorney backed because you guys know about that rider, attorney approval required, seller's attorney approval required. Yeah, that goes on all my contracts. That goes on all of my contracts. Nothing is being added or changed to any contract without it passing my desk for approval. So these are some of the benefits that you have when you have seller attorney representation. Remember, you guys are supposed to sell real estate. You didn't go to law school, right? Here's one of the other benefits. Driving timelines and enforcing terms of the contract. Time is of the essence. And I know it can be very challenging for realtors to receive clear status updates and avoid delays. It can be challenging. How many times have you sent an email saying, where are we with the lien search? Is title clear? Is this done? Where's the escrow letter? Where's the escrow letter? Right? Where's the loan application? Where are you with the loan approval? Where are you with, I would assume, and I'm sure you probably would as well, that those requests are taken a little bit differently when they come from the seller's attorney. And it takes some of that responsibility and hassle off of you, right? So with seller attorney representation, the attorney keeps an eye on the timeline. And they're engaged from the very beginning. They're engaged from the very beginning. See, real estate school doesn't teach us about these different tools that are available to us to, again, set us apart, make our job easier, protect our clients, keep us out of hot water when a contract goes south because a term was missed, right? Seller attorney representation does that for you. Now, the fifth point. This is actually one of my favorite parts. This is where I honestly, even when when we're closing a file and I'm not the attorney for any of the parties, where we were just engaged to conduct the closing, efficient dispute resolution. So, as you know, disputes come up all of the time. No, you're wrong. No, you're wrong. They should have did this. They should have did that. No, and come with all the emails. Well, here's the deal. And of course, along with that dispute comes even more emails from your seller, right? How can they do this? Why are they doing this? How do we address this? How do we stop that? As you guys know, you're not attorneys and you're not able to give legal advice, but an attorney can. You're not an attorney and you're not able to interpret the law, but an attorney can. So what ends up happening is seller representation, and this is funny because we talk about this all the time, that people think that attorneys kill deals. Again, this is my secret sauce. Seller representation can keep deals together. You know how they keep deals together? Because they are able to give legal advice. Prime example. I most often, the biggest issue I get is when a buyer does not have their clear to close. We're set to close August 4th. Buyer does not have a lender's clear to close. Lender says we just need 2 more days, and the seller is just irate. No, we must close. We must close. We must close. I'm canceling. I'm canceling. I'm canceling. And let's make this casual. This is the first extension. And so if you're able to have their attorney say, okay, Mr. Seller, I understand that we wanted to close by the 4th, but here's the deal. If we cancel the contract, we go back on, we've already been under contract for 24 days, 25 days, 26 days. If we cancel the contract, go back on the market to get another offer, to go through this entire process again, we're looking at another 28, 30 days versus 2 days. I do the same thing with the realtors. Okay, well, if we cancel this contract, or if we do this is what the likely resolve is. And I can do that because that's literally what it is. You'll be surprised how many deals we keep together once cooler minds prevail, because that's the other thing. Let's just resolve this. Here's the likely outcome of this. So we keep the deal together, or we say, you know what? This is just going to drag on. Let's just cancel this for a quick resolve. Let's just cancel it. Done. Let's just cancel it. Because this is not going to be resolved. This title issue cannot be cleared in 2 days, right? Probate, a deed from 3 owners ago. No, we need to cancel this because this is not going to be resolved, or something that's just drastic. And so attorney seller representation can assist you with either keeping it together or a quick resolve, or in the reverse. Maybe you have a closing agent, they don't know how to resolve a title issue, but the attorney does. Look, this is a quick way to resolve this, and now we're on our way to the closing table. Guys, in this market, we have to, again, differentiate ourselves from others. There are tools that are available to allow us to do business better and easier in this market than we ever had before. And attorney seller representation is one of those. On the screen, you see our contact information. If you've not worked with us, you still have questions about attorney representation. If you're like, okay, I get it, but I still have a few questions, feel free to call me. Feel free to text me, email me. My contact information is there on the screen. Do we have any questions on that? I think that was pretty quick and to the point. I want to see you guys Engage seller attorney representation more. It will help you. It will help you before you even get to the closing table. It'll help you get that deal. It'll help you, again, build the credibility with the seller, help you write clean deals, and help you get to the closing table without a bunch of headaches, right? Or at least you're not you're not in it by yourself. You're not in it by yourself. So in closing, this was important to me. This I came across this earlier this week, in my in my meditation, I guess I should say, early in the morning. You guys, if you follow me on social, you know I'm up. I'm glad, great. I'm glad that you, if this was clear enough to you, drop a one in the chat. If it was clear, if you now understand seller representation, seller attorney representation, and you can't wait to get in front of a seller to get that listing, drop a one in the chat for me. So listen, I want you guys to know, we always, in closing, we always, we have a conversation with ourselves about the next thing to do, right? We have a conversation with ourselves about execution. Awesome. We have a conversation with ourselves about how we are going to implement the next thing to get us to our goals. And so this I came across, and it says it's a quote I came across. It says your circumstances aren't the reason you can't succeed. They are the reality in which you must succeed. Your circumstances aren't the reason you can't succeed. They are the reality in which you must succeed. So the inventory, the interest rates, the the other thing, they're not the reason you can't succeed, guys. If others are closing, you can close too. If others are going under contract, you can go under contract as well. What you have to understand is you have to pivot. They are the reality now. When we talk about shift and you talk about pivoting, this is our these circumstances are our new reality in which you must succeed. This is the reality in which you must succeed. So it's not that you can't succeed. Your circumstances, I want you to internalize this quote this week. My circumstances, the circumstances that are going on right now, are not the reason I can't succeed. I'm going to have to pivot and adjust and understand that these are the realities. This is the reality now in which I must succeed. I must be able to have a conversation about the interest rate. I must be able to create inventory. What you must do now is you have to do more activity. We know that, right? And so accept that where we are today is just what it is, right? When it's raining outside, I can't go outside. You go get an umbrella, right? If it's cold outside, you don't say I'm not going outside. You go get a jacket. Interest rates are up. Buyers think that this is not a time for them to buy. You say no. Let me show you that these interest rates are normal. What was going on 2 years ago? That was a false narrative. That was a false reality. This is the new reality, right? When you have sellers saying, "Oh, I can't sell now because I can't get $100,000 over market like we were 2 years ago." Well, guess what? These are the circumstances now, and you realize how to have that conversation with them. So this is a mindset shift. Take a screenshot of this. Keep this before you this week, as we until we come together next week. Your circumstances aren't the reason you can't succeed. They are the reality now in which you must succeed. They are the reality in which you must pivot, you must shift, and do the things you need to do to succeed. All right. So we got one quick question. So you're saying it looks better when an attorney is A at every closing for the sake of peace of mind. I won't even say it looks better. It's a fact, right? Your results are just different for the five things that we discussed, right? You're building credibility with your seller. If there's a question that your seller has, for example, about something on the settlement statement or a document that they're asked to execute, just by virtue of training and credentials, who I would think if they get direction from an attorney, it's going to be a little bit more credible than they're going to feel more confident. because again, that's what the attorney is they're trained to do, is explain a document. So look at those 5 things. We're talking about contract drafting. They could be confident that an attorney has reviewed the contract that they've executed, right? Terms of the contract. And dispute resolution. If a dispute arises and they're told, well, these are the facts of this dispute, this is the law, 9 times out of 10 this will be the result, this is why we should take this action. Just a legal opinion. Got it. Awesome. All right, guys, we knocked that out. Got 5 minutes back to yourself. 4 minutes now. Back to yourself to go grab your lunch. And again, go make yourself proud. Again, I'll see you next Thursday. Love you more than you know. Bye.